I welcome all of you once again. And the session is on startup acquisitions, turning them into success. So I would like all the panelists, to introduce their companies first of all, what their companies do. Starting off with...
Hi everyone, very good afternoon. Pravin Agarwala here. I run a company called BetterPlace. We are Asia's largest human capital SaaS platform for frontline workforce. When you think of organizations with delivery boys, manufacturing, BFSI, and so on, they typically have large number of blue-collar workers, and they use our software from hire to retire or hire to exit to manage the entire workforce. We operate in India, South Asia, Middle East, and Saudi right now.
Saurabh?
Hi, my name is Saurabh Varma. I run a company called Wondrlab. I worked for a large MNC called Publicis Group for 17 years. And then in 2020, November, set up a company called Wondrlab. Our whole model is driven through acquisition. So for me, this topic is extremely valid. In December, we acquired a company called WYP, which is a content company, infamous for the very infamous Tanishq campaign, if you would recall. Then in April, we acquired a company called Neon Digital, which is a performance marketing company. We went ahead and acquired a micro-nano influencer platform called Opportune. And then recently, a month back, we acquired a Salesforce consulting and data company called Symetrics. So our whole model is about acquisition. I look forward to this conversation.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Angad Rajain. I am the Chief Strategy Officer for Tenon Group. Tenon Group is a more conventional physical security, facility management, and remote monitoring as a service business. We operate across 3 geographies, India, UK, and Singapore. We're lucky to be one of the largest players in India in our space. And for us, our journey to acquire businesses and new ideas is to put fresh energy into our organization, which is now 28 years old.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Anil Nagar. I run a company by the name Adda 24/7. Adda 24/7 is an education technology company, so primarily online test prep. And we started with government exam test prep, where we started helping students for various government job exams. But now we are full-fledged test prep, starting from IIT, JEE, NEET till UPSC. We cater to students in Tier 2, Tier 3 towns and villages. USP is high quality, affordable education in vernacular languages. We cater to almost 50 million users every month on our platform.
All right, thank you so much. And as you told, you have made acquisitions, all of you. So want to check, my first question to you all of would be, what are the parameters you take into account while making acquisitions?
Yeah, so maybe I can go first. We did 7 acquisitions in last 18 months in India and Southeast Asia. Some of them were fairly large as well. And the way we went about it is we created a kind of framework defining what is BetterPlace journey over next 5 years, right? So that's the first framework we did. And then we started looking at within that framework, what is a build versus buy strategy, right? Should we build it? Should we buy it? And build versus buy was driven by 2 factors largely. Number 1 was time to market. So how fast we can go in the market if we build it versus so how fast we can go. And the second point that we looked into typically is if we are building it, what is the cost versus buying it, right? So is there a exponential cost or cost to opportunity that we are losing otherwise, right? So these were the 2 factors. And the 3 parameters that on which we work is basically if we are buying something on our product roadmap of 5 years, the first thing that we look into is the product features or modules the capabilities that we would like to provide to our customers, right? The solutions that we would like to provide. The second is the geographical expansion that we would like to do. So whether we are, let's say, we acquired a company in Indonesia, and that's largely driven by the fact that we wanted to acquire something in Indonesia, and similarly in Malaysia, right? So it was largely geographical expansion because we get the market, we get the team, we get the culture and so on, right? But in India, we would rather acquire more on the technology side, like Easy Docs, like House, which are more adding to the product, right? And the third thing that we look into is the customer vertical that we want to get into. For example, we are not, let's say, in construction, and there is a company which is doing similar thing in construction, then do we want to buy out that company, which we have not done. That part we have not done as yet. But that's basically the framework on which we operate for our acquisition strategy or inorganic growth strategy.
Saurabh?
I think it's a great question, Priya. And for me, why do you acquire and how do you acquire are both a function of your strategy. So in our case, we were very clear upfront that we wanted to build a global network out of India. 4 lines of businesses, right? And we wanted to scale very quickly. Our acquisitions were all shaped by our ability to raise money, the targets available in the marketplace, how quickly we could, organize what we refer to as an integration play between those, the right price. So there are a whole bunch of, I would say, strategic reasons why you would do what you do as far as acquisitions are concerned. And for us, we were very clear that we would have a geographical play, we would have a capability play, and then it would also be about adjacencies, right? What comes first, what comes second, what can you really cross-sell and build, right? So I think everybody will have a framework in terms of why you're acquiring, and then how do you go about making those acquisitions happen.
Angad?
So maybe slightly different for us. We're a 28-year-old business, as I mentioned. The first acquisition we did was 10 years ago. We reached a certain scale and we reached a certain plateau in terms of growth. So growth became the parameter for us, which defined us to acquire another line of business. However, the journey as you see it and the parameter keeps evolving for different markets or different service offering. So for instance, for a new market afresh, we want to look at an established business. We want to make sure that they are generating positive cash flows, that the professional management is already in place in case we're doing a 100% stake buyout and there is no promoters that will stick around. So there are multiple factors that we will look at that. On the flip side, as we're now seeing a lot more technology acquisitions in the last 4 or 5 years, the parameters changed slightly. We're looking at more, is the leader of the pack going to stick around? And does he have the ability to grow the business? And does that business have synergies and scalable potential with our business? So those are the 3 things. Will the captain stick around? And this is something that we have there's no guarantee. We've had journeys where, the captain or the promoter or the founder wants to leave in 24 months. Or there'll be a inflection point at some point of time where cultural differences come across. But the parameter keeps evolving from our perspective. As a business, we have a philosophy that we don't want to make an acquisition for the purpose of sole revenue addition. It has to add scalability, profitability back to our line of core business.
Acquisitions have been a crucial part of our journey in last 7 years. We started as a tech player in certain categories, so we used to cater to certain exams earlier, and we wanted to enter to a totally new categories. For example, we wanted to enter a UPSC category, UPSC exam prep category, and again we had 2 choices: one to build inside, and other to look outside and acquire some company. So for us, I think 2 things which matter the most are, first of all, there should be synergy. When we combine both the entities together, the value creation should be more than sum of the 2. So there should be something some synergy which should create value when both of these companies come together. For example, when we were acquiring this company, we had the tech, we had solid tech, we had invested so many years in building the technology. This company was really good in content. They had very poor tech. And as soon as we identified that they had great content and if we can fit in the right technology into it, then probably it can create huge value. Then we could sense that this is the right acquisition for us. So first is the value creation. Together it should be more than sum of individuals. And second is for us it was entering into a totally different territory where we were not present, and probably if we'll build it on our own, then it's going to take us some years. So we wanted to save all those years. So this was one of the acquisition, but we did one other acquisition where we just bought the technology. So we wanted to enter AR, VR category, and we wanted to kind of give that experience to our users. We could sense there is no revenue probably, and even in long duration, they will not be able to generate revenue independently. But clubbed with our ecosystem, where we have millions of users on our platform, this can really enhance our user experience. So I think acquisitions should be completely need-based. There should be a clear need of that. And there should be certain value which should be derived out of acquisitions.
Fine, you talked about the parameters. Does the structure of the acquisition also matters? How important is that?
I think absolutely critical. If you acquire something 100% with a payoff period of 3 or 5 years, there's a great chance that your founder is going to run away after 3 to 5 years. None of the founders want to stay back and be employees. You acquire 100%, you are hoping that your mothership is a culture you will essentially push through the acquisition. You acquire 50 to 60%, it's a very different frame of reference. You will have to keep the brand separate because you're acquiring that founder. You want him to stay back as an entrepreneur, right, for a long period of time. So he will have independence to run what he wants to. The whole fundamental of why you're doing the acquisition changes. It creates its own kinds of challenges, but it has huge advantages as well. So it depends really on how you're structuring the acquisition. Your acquisition can be structured fully on cash. It can be structured on cash and equity. That itself changes the frame of reference. If your acquisition is structured as equity, you are actually going to create a common currency, which then removes a lot of the silos or cultural issues which might pop up over a period of time. So I think deciding how you do the acquisition, how you structure it, is actually critical eventually in the shape that you give it. The problem with acquiring 50, 60% and not 100% is that it actually becomes an issue down the line. 10 years, 15 years down the line, when the entrepreneur really becomes old, he still doesn't want to let go, right? And that's when the challenges really creep up. So it really depends on what you're trying to build, how you're building it, what's the purpose of the acquisition, what role it plays in your portfolio. When you acquire something which is 100%, you can roll the cash up in the mother entity. When you acquire only 60, 70%, that cash gets stuck in the legal entity that you have acquired. You can then, of course, use that as a module itself to do further acquisitions in the space that you are consolidating. So it's all about the strategic choices you make and how you have thought through all the acquisitions.
Yeah, I think structure matters a lot because ultimately you want integration to be smooth. And for that, you have to align everything, including the team, founders, everyone. For us, one of the things which works is how you are able to create the deal as a mix of cash and equity. Because ultimately, if the incoming founders or incoming team has your equity, so there is some alignment because all of us are working on the same equity or for the same equity. So if we can figure out a deal which is a mix of it and which is a slightly long-term deal, I think that works the best.
So I'll share maybe a slightly different perspective. My first acquisition when I joined Tenon was, business in UK. We looked at 25 businesses, got to final stage with 5, finally signed with 1. And the structure was the trickiest part of our deal, apart from the valuation, obviously, because we had to build consensus, both sides. We couldn't force our way through with them. We also want to have enough, stickiness from the outgoing vendors or owners of the business to hand over a good, clean, stable, sustainable business. So what I learned through this journey from my first acquisition to now my, eighth one is you have to find that balance that works for you as well as the other side. So we've done acquisitions where we have done 51% with pre-agreed payouts in year 1, 2, 3, up to 100%. We have done deals which was cash out on day 1. Not a big fan of that. We have done deals where there were certain equity that would be given. So it's cash and equity 80-20 because we wanted some upside to be shared by them and they wanted to share the risk with us. So the bottom line being, you have to find that balance. So if you don't have the management bandwidth and you're going to buy a business out cash, 100%, think about it. How are you going to integrate it? Will you be able to do it? If you feel you're going into a new space, new market, new geography, and you see that there is value in the founder, structure a deal where you get to share the upside with them, especially true for tech businesses, because guess what? They were the one who found that idea. They were the one who seeded and did the first 4 years of bootstrapping it. You coming in, telling them what to do is only going to dilute the future potential of that idea. So think about structure more from the comfort that develops between both parties. Obviously, as an organization, you'll have to balance what works best for you while still keeping enough ties with the other side.
Pravin?
I think everything is said, so what more I can add? But I think the point that I would like to emphasize is on what is that we want to achieve post-acquisition, right? So the deal is done, and what happens after that for next 3 years, 5 years? That also decides on how you want to construct the deal, right? For example, like Angad mentioned, if you want the founders of those organizations to continue running the business, you want to structure the deal, which is like 3 years, 5 years payout period with incentive structure and all. Otherwise, if you're buying something, you're paying it out, what is the motivation for the leadership team on the other side to stay back, right? So there has to be enough and more motivation for people to stay back. If you do not have management bandwidth to run the business and you acquire the company, you paid out everything, the leadership team left, you basically are setting yourself for failure because you have no one to run it, right? So it depends a lot on how you want to run it over the next 3 years, 5 years, or whatever the time period is. Second is the culture or is the people that you want to work with, right? So what is this? Even if you say, okay, I force you to stay because of this structure, but then you have to live with that pain every day, that also does not make sense. So it has to be very flexible in my view. And every deal would be different. So it's not a standard saying, I acquire in the same fashion everything. Every deal would be different depending on people, size, shape, opportunity, and so on.
Saurabh, you wanted to add something?
No, I just fundamentally believe it's a function of where you are in the journey, right? What capabilities you're building. Designing any acquisition has to fundamentally do with realizing whether you're acquiring an entrepreneur or you're acquiring the business or you're doing both. I can tell you that, I mean, we have done maybe 100 acquisitions in my earlier avatar, and I don't remember a single founder staying back after the exit, right? You can ask them to stay for a couple of years, but they will exit. No entrepreneur wants to be part of bureaucracy. They want to run it the way they want to, right? So designing an acquisition where the founder or an entrepreneur can remain a founder or an entrepreneur, in my mind, is actually key to long-term success, especially if you want to acquire the spirit that he champions.
All right. So it takes you to our next question. What pitfalls should be avoided while, making acquisitions? Any pitfalls you think should be avoided?
So you can go first and please add. think and I was part of SAP before starting BetterPlace, and we used to do these acquisitions there as well. I think the few things where it can go wrong, in my humble opinion. Number one is that you acquired because it looked, let's say, very interesting at that moment, but you did not have a clear strategy over the next 5 years, 10 years on growing the business and so on, right? Second is that you acquire, but you do not have anyone actually bringing the companies together. So what is your post-migration strategy? What is your post-migration integration strategy, right? What things should work together or not? Otherwise, we end up blaming, and this didn't happen, that didn't happen, right? Third is the people strategy, where most of the time it fails, right? The leadership you have acquired, the team you acquired, like Saurabh mentioned, the founders will not stay. So who are going to run it, right? Is there a cultural kind of bipolar thing where you're not going along well? You have a different people strategy. And most of the people do not focus on people. They end up focusing on everything else but people, right? The fourth thing where every company might be having different processes. Which processes you would like to align and where you would like to leave them alone? You cannot say that because I have acquired someone, everything that I do is right and everything I should impose on the other party, right? That does not work in my opinion, because it might be there are better things or might be things that should be done differently. We have a company in Indonesia, another one in Malaysia. Culturally, they are different. People, they are different. Business models are slightly different. We can't say that everything has to run from here to there. But what we do is we ensure that if we have a global people policies, everywhere it goes the same. So the benefits are not kind of skewed towards headquarter or because we acquired them. Financial policies, financial control system, we align completely across all organizations because we strongly believe audit, compliance and all is a trap that you can get into otherwise. But these are the issues that we have seen, we have learned in class, but I think Saurabh can talk more about it.
No, I think a great answer, Pravin. For me, I agree. You start off with a shared purpose. If that purpose is not clear, don't do the acquisition. If you don't drive the alignment on the story upfront, on your ambition, chances are you'll fail. So I think that's the fundamental to how you start off. Second, I strongly believe investing in great bankers and great lawyers is key. Right, your FDD, LDD, your financial legal due diligence has to be absolutely robust. Spend the time and the energy and the money to make sure you have clarity in terms of what you're acquiring. You don't want an acquisition to happen and then you discover there are 100 things which you wish you had discovered earlier. So I think especially, even if you're doing a small acquisition, right, I would urge you to spend the money on a decent LDD and an FTD. I think that's a key. Post-acquisition, right, really developing an integration plan, right? No point acquiring something if you can't pump prime the growth from what the founder was doing. I actually am a great believer that growth solves all problems. All bad news, the messes and the problems only happen when growth goes away. So if you're able to actually put together a plan which actually pump primes the growth, half the problems go away. And the last part is really about clarity around structures, frameworks. Pravin mentioned that. If you are acquiring and you want to keep the P&L separate, but you want to consolidate the audit function, right? Or you want to consolidate the finance function. Be absolutely clear and upfront, right, that this is where the controls will go away. Where do the controls exist? Where do the controls go away? So the definitive agreements in your SP and SHA, right, become absolutely the key, right? I would urge actually your term sheets to be so comprehensive that it can actually flow into a seamless SP and SHA.
Angad?
I think Saurabh and Praveen have shared very valuable insights. The only one that I'll probably share, which is a learning that I've picked up, is when you are in the market to acquire, and it's either you find a great company and you want to acquire, or you find a great space area, industry where you want to acquire, let's say a geography or an industry or a expansion area. don't get cowed down with the fact that I must do an acquisition just for the sake of doing an acquisition, because what you may see on the surface of it may not translate into the real value that you have in your mind ascribed to it. And the biggest, turning point for me in an acquisition is the, financial and the legal due diligence. So this is folks that are on your side, your advisors telling you all the things which are problematic in a business. Try not to undermine their feedback because you're so keen to close a deal that you undermine the feedback that some of your advisors give you. But measure them, measure the challenges and problem, whether these problems are surmountable or unsurmountable, whether you're willing to pay the price for these changes into the deal. So if you, that's where the wheat gets separated from the chaff. And if you've done that journey, 9 out of 10 times, you won't buy into a bad acquisition. You won't buy into a financial challenge subsequently. Everything else, I think Saurabh and Pravin have explained rather clearly.
Yeah, I think most of the things have been already explained by panelists. One thing I want to add here is, which I saw in our case, that founder motivation after the acquisition, all the efforts from the company or from our side, how we integrate that into our ecosystem culturally. I think that is very important. So one of the things which we noticed is that how we bring that element of equality between the two teams. For example, if let's say my company is acquiring another company, generally teams might be divided into two parts. That okay, we acquired this company, but ultimately, if both the teams don't work together and they treat each of them equals, this acquisition might fail. So how you culturally integrate both the companies together, how everyone comes on the same platform and start treating each other respectfully and at equal level, I think is very important. And second, of course, is founder motivation. The way you have structured your deal, or the way you are treating founders, or the way you are evolving their role in the new org, which is a joint org. I think this is also very important, because what I have seen is that if the founder is not motivated, then it will also trickle down the bottom, and it might bring down the morale and motivation of the rest of the team also. So these two things.
One additional point as you were speaking, I think one of the mistakes that we did at the first acquisition is we started talking about we and they, right? While it was a 100% acquired company. So this is how we do it, that's how they do it. And that we and they starts becoming bigger in terms of the bridge that you can't build anymore, right? And that's something we learned very early, that the day it is done, it is only us and no one is they anymore, right? And that's something we apply very, very religiously in everything now.
Interesting, very insightful. I just want to wrap up the session with my last question. How important are acquisitions for overall business growth?
So, I mean, we have grown organically and inorganically. I do not see like inorganic is the only way to grow, right? It's a strategy decision, like mentioned in the beginning, that what is your 5 years plan? It's a build versus buy decision. Are you ready for an acquisition as well? That's another thing that you should look at from a growth point of view, because only acquiring does not help you in growth. It might take you back as well. And there are many examples that you can read in the news these days. So it's very important that what's your plan for 5 years, how you bring them together. Acquisition definitely helps you growing with respect to speed, if you do it the right way. And of course, expansion into new markets where you might not have footprint otherwise. So my view is, do it if you think it is really part of your strategy. Otherwise, organic is a good enough way to grow.
Priyan, in my business, it's a shame that after so many years of such incredible talent, there's not a single network in our business which ever got built, right? There are networks out of the UK, the US, Japan. Nobody ever built a network. And I think it was because of two reasons. One was there wasn't enough access to capital. And second was the ability to drive valuations. Now, both those have actually gone. So I think fundamentally, if you have ambition, a great acquisition, and I use the word great with a lot of caution, right, can actually help you deliver far quicker on your ambition. The problem with acquisitions is that if you acquire something and you're not able to pump prime the growth, the founder leaves, the business collapses, right? It's actually a risk, right? So you must know why you're doing it, what is the strategic role it plays in your plan, what the roadmap looks like, what are you going to do with it to pump prime the growth, like I mentioned. And if you're able to manage that, an acquisition is actually an extraordinary tool in your arsenal. Every entrepreneur should have that. Considering where we are sitting and what will happen in the India story in the next 10 years, is an absolutely critical tool for entrepreneurs to explore, right? It can help you drive valuations. Access to capital is difficult at the moment, right, for many entrepreneurs here. But it's still much better than what it used to be. So we have an unprecedented opportunity, provided it's seen as a tool and it's done well.
So, for us, I think if I try to answer the question very directly, is acquisition an important part, for building legacy business? Absolutely. You'll have to find out what points you need to do this acquisition. So, a trigger point for a legacy business wanting to, or business wanting to build a legacy would be growth rates flattening out, or markets getting, too busy, your product becoming too commoditized. So that's where we've always looked at, is the growth starting to plateau out? Are we losing our differentiating factor? Have we lost the pricing power completely, or we're on that journey to losing the pricing power? And thereby figuring out, okay, this market segment has high growth. So that's solving a growth problem, great for acquisition. This product line has an opportunity of improving profitability or scalable, and both at the same time, great opportunity. This overseas expansion, because we've done a couple of them over the years, and we continue to be, we've had mixed experience, so there's no guarantee that an overseas acquisition will succeed or not. But what value does it add? Does it bring expertise and validation for you? Does it bring you the ability to cross-sell across 2 markets? So, from our perspective, my advice would be always be open, never say that, now is not the time to acquire. Keep looking, keep your eyes open, keep those engagements alive. So you're able to build those relationships as you go through that journey. Identify those inflection points in your business where you see, okay, 2 years from now, growth's going to slow down. 2 years from now, I'm going to lose my pricing power. Or 3, I don't have the management bandwidth to go to the next level. So can I acquire that management bandwidth with this bigger business? So this is how I would advise anyone to structure, their acquisition strategy. And rest would be depending on your product line.
True. For our business also, we have the same feeling that acquisitions are very strategic, and they can add a lot of value if done in a proper way, or if there is a right fitment or need in the company. So again, my view is that if you are thinking of, anyways, as panelists said, that you should keep on looking for those synergies and possibilities of acquiring new businesses. But one of the things I will advise that you should not do is acquiring companies only for revenue. Because in most of the cases, what I've seen is that in startups, people tend to acquire companies to add revenue, maybe from valuation perspective, but they kind of miss out on many other parameters we were just discussing. So look for synergies, look for value creation, but yes, acquisitions can add a lot of value.
All right, thank you for this wonderful session.